Welcome to today's Horror Ghost Stories. My experience with the Wendigo. When I was the age of 9, me and my sister got into trouble with our parents and were sent to our grandma's house. Our grandma lives in a log cabin in the Appalachia and has been for her entire life. When we entered Appalachia, we were met with massive mountains and the amount of trees that I've never seen before, even to this day. For context, I have never been to Appalachia or near the woods for my entire life, and I will never go to the woods ever again because of this. When we arrived at Grandma's cabin, it was past dark, and me and my sister met our grandma, who was happy to have guests at her house. We got inside, and I started reading some book about medieval times. There was no power, so we used fire to see, but we did have flashlights. When Grandma was making dinner, me and my sister snuck out of the cabin through the window. Being kids, we wandered into the forest where we found Grandma's garden, but soon we started hearing sounds. Not deer sounds, as I've never been to a forest before this, but it sounded like rough gargling mixed with what I can describe a disheveled call, as if it were calling to someone. Me and my sister, being curious, started walking to the sound, and along the way we found dead animals and claw marks on the trees. My sister is big into animals, and I asked her, "I think it was a bear, right?" She responded, "No, I've seen pictures of bear marking on trees. These are way too high to be made by a bear." I asked, "Then what made them?" As I said that another sound appears, but it was from behind us. Me and my sister swung around and spotted a deer, but as I could see, it was about 12 feet tall, but I'm probably wrong about its height, as I was just a 4 foot at the time. It made a different noise as if it spotted prey. We were not smart enough to pack flashlights, so we did not have a good sense of vision. Before I could say anything, my sister said, "That's not a deer or a bear, it's something else." I did not even say anything, as a smell overwhelmed me, and it started getting closer and closer. My sister said, "We need to get out of here." I just stood paralyzed with fear. She slapped me, and I came back to reality. She repeated the same words, and we started running. The distance it was away from us was about 200 meters, if not 100. When we started running, it started to speed up its pace slowly, as if it had wanted to give us a false sense of hope, making us think we could escape, and then it lunged, and what I can describe as unhuman, like going 5 meters in a few seconds. For some extra background, me and my sister are around the same age. She is 1 year younger than me, making her 8. I was one of the fastest in my class, beating almost everyone, and I was pretty athletic, while my sister was on the slower side and weak. But then my sister tripped and fell on a vine, twisting her ankle. I stopped, and my face sweated. If I stopped to pick her up, I would most likely die, as I would have been incredibly slow. But then a gunshot ringed throughout the woods. My grandma's neighbor shot a bullet at the monster, and he yelled, "Get over here now!" Without thinking, I dragged my sister to him, and the beast or monster or whatever the hell you want to call it, screamed. Not of agony, but of screams of what I can describe as people. People who have been killed by it, and people's souls who are locked in it, suffering inside of the beast. Then another. And another bullet shot out of the rifle, and as far as I could see, one hit it in the head, while one hit its thigh. It started to back away and ran back into the woods. The neighbor took us back to our grandma's house, and he told her that it found them. She understood, and the neighbor stayed with us in grandma's cabin for the night, but I could see shadows moving in the woods in the window, as if it was waiting for us to come outside. At dawn, we stepped outside, and what we could see terrified us. We saw blood from it leading into the forest, but also a collapsed tree landing right next to our car. It had tried to trap us in the woods so it could hunt us again, but it had missed by less than a foot. If it had hit a tree next to our car, we would have been stuck in the woods. As I later learned, our neighbor only owned a cabin and a bike, no car. But our grandma drove us out of the forest, and to the nearest cell phone station she could find. It was a few hours out, but when she found one, she called our parents and told them that it had found us and that we need to go back home now. because we will not be as lucky to escape with our lives again. Later that day, our parents picked us up. Our mum hugged both of us and said, "I almost lost you," and started ugly crying while Dad talked with Grandma. And he talked about the recent NFL game as if our lives had not been almost lost. He never believed in that stuff. He also grew up in the city, not the woods. Later that day, we were home, and me and my sister could not fall asleep for 2 days. I was in therapy until recently, until the therapist dropped me as a client for making up stories for attention. I did some research recently, and it checks most of the boxes of it being a Wendigo, as it was tall, skinny fast, and looked like a Dear Next story. The Wolfman of Indiana. If you live in Indiana, you've probably witnessed strange things in a lot of places. In fact, apart from Pennsylvania, California, and New Jersey, Indiana is probably one of the strangest states in the country. Plenty of legends are bred from that area, but one true and, quite frankly, creepy legend is the Wolfman of Versailles. The tale that comes out of this is a well-known legend, but unlike many legends, can actually be backed up by historical evidence. It's about a man who goes missing, vicious wolves, and the Civil War. In 1863, the Civil War was completely tearing the country apart, and during a march in Indiana, a man named Silas Shimmerhorn somehow became separated from the rest of his regiment. They searched every forest, farm, mountain, and field they could find, but he seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Eventually, they figured he had died from exposure or wild animals and gave his wife their regards, but that wasn't close to the end of the man's stories. Instead, it was just the beginning. As soon as things got back to normal in 1866, things started getting crazy again. A pack of wolves started attacking every loose animal or prey they could catch. The wolves weren't just opportunistic, but extremely aggressive. The strange thing was that multiple people reported seeing a naked and unkempt man running with them and eating whatever they did. The man ran normally on 2 legs like any normal person would, but he seemed to be protected by the wolf pack he was with, and no one could explain how or why he was able to keep himself alive and live with them. The soldiers also told tales about what had happened in the past when they tried to find him. There was an unoccupied cave that they surmised he had gone to as a way to stay safe. When they eventually found where they surmised he had gone, they were confronted by vicious wolves. Every time they went to the cave, the wolves would appear and get them to back off. Finally, they had enough and killed every member of the pack that they came in contact with. They eventually killed enough of them to finally investigate, and when they did, all they found were animal bones, small cinders from a fire, a straw mat, some bloodstains, and a gun carved with the man's initials, SS. It seemed that after being separated, he had found a cave, established dominance with the wolves, and eventually found his niche in the pack, but fled when his pack was taken out with no indication of where he had gone. For the next few years, many residents tried to find him, but failed to do so, despite again searching what seemed to be every inch of the state and surrounding towns nearby. Despite all their efforts, Silas had vanished again, and this time no clues were found anywhere, and nothing that had happened before happened ever again. No farm attacks, no vicious wolves, no naked, unkempt man, nothing. People did say they saw the wolf man, but every time their report was checked, there was no proof, just their claim to go on. The residents of Versailles eventually chose to just discount reports as flights of fancy or people looking for some money, despite the tragic outcome being an actual thing at one time. Today, Versailles is pretty average, just a small town nestled in the Hoosier state. But if you stay in the right area and talk to the right kinds of people, you'll hear that the Wolfman is still sighted to this day, along with his wolves. The spectral man and his ghostly pack still run through the wilds of Indiana, according to the rumors. I can't say if the entire story is true, but maybe there is a man spirit out there, replaying the remainder of his life. Next story, The Fox and the Lady. I don't know exactly how to put this story into words. so I'm just going to start writing and see where it goes. First off, I would like to say that I am a Christian and I believe that when a person dies, they go to either heaven or hell, depending on if they are saved or not. The reason I say this is because this story is going to cover a topic that contradicts the way I believe, but it's something that I do not have an explanation for, no matter how hard I've looked for one. I grew up hunting and exploring the mountains of East Tennessee with my father and 2 younger brothers. Some of my earliest memories are of my father and I walking through the woods before daylight to one of our hunting spots, traversing the steep and wild terrain of the North Cumberland Mountains. To us, the hunt wasn't about killing the biggest buck or having the flashiest hunting gear. It was about spending quality time with each other in the same country our ancestors had hunted many years ago. One of my dad's rules was that we would always hunt within a couple hundred yards of each other up until I was about 12 years old. Those mountains are rugged and anything could happen, plus there wasn't a lick of phone signal within 20 miles of where we were. If something were to happen, you were on your own. My dad always taught us how to move through the woods, so by the time I was 12, I was already a pretty capable woodsman. As time went on, my middle brother and I began to break off from hunting with our dad and struck out on our own. One particular evening, my brother and I decided that we wanted to go hunting the following day. We decided that we would go to a spot that we were very familiar with because we would have to leave that evening to make it to one of our friends' house for a bonfire. The morning of the hunt, we woke up around 5 a.m. and loaded the truck with our rifles, ammunition, and what little bit of hunting gear we were bringing. It was the month of December, and it was frigid cold that morning. We arrived at the top of the mountain in the truck around 6:30 a.m., where we would get a quick game plan together before entering the woods. We decided that my brother would enter the woods on the southwest side of the road and walk about 1.5 miles along the spine of the ridge, where he would then drop off of the mountain on the south side and walk about 100 yards to his spot. I was going to enter the woods on the northeast side of the road and travel about 1 mile along the spine of the ridge and then drop off of the north side into a deep hollow and then travel in the same direction for another mile or so until I came to a stand of small pine trees where I would sit and watch a stream that meandered down the hollow and out of sight. During the walk to my hunting spot, I noticed how quiet the woods were this early in the morning. There's nothing more peaceful, in my opinion, than being alone in the mountains while everything is still and the wilderness is asleep. The only sounds I could hear were my own footsteps and the occasional deep breath I would take while traversing the steep and rugged terrain. I made it to the stand of small pines before daybreak and raked the leaves away to bare ground where I planned to sit, so that I wouldn't spook any animals when and if I were to move. I leaned my rifle against a tree to my left, got settled in, and watched the sun rise above the crest of the mountain, and listened as the woods slowly came to life. It was a beautiful sight. After about an hour of watching the birds and squirrels play in the warm rays of sunshine poking through the trees, I noticed a red fox trotting down the ridge in a straight line toward me. I figured that once the fox spotted me, it would turn and hightail it the other way, but to my surprise, it walked right up to about 6 feet away from me and stopped. It began to stand up on its hind legs and then drop back down on all fours over and over again in a slow and methodical way. I was taken back by this because foxes usually avoid humans at all costs. After about a minute of this strange fox encounter, it turned and trotted down the stream in front of me until it disappeared. I was shocked by what I had just witnessed, but I wasn't the least bit scared. I thought that maybe it had never seen a human before and was curious as to what kind of creature I was. A few hours had passed and I hadn't seen anything except the fox and a few birds and squirrels, so I decided I would close my eyes for a few minutes and rest. I fell into a light slumber for about 15 minutes before I woke up to a strange sound, or should I say, a lack thereof. The sudden silence of the woods had awoken me. There wasn't a sound to be heard, not the song of a bird, nor a whisper of wind. As I looked around, wondering what would cause this sudden silence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dreadfulness. I felt like I was being watched from every side of my being all of a sudden. As I scanned back down the stream at which I had been looking not 1 minute ago, I seen something that I thought had to be a trick of my eyes. There, on the bank of the stream, about 40 yards away from me, stood a woman. She was dressed in a long, almost translucent white dress. She had long grey hair, and what I could see of her hands and feet were greyish-white in colour. She was barefoot and half bent down with her left hand in the stream. I was frozen. I didn't move an inch, and I'm not sure that I even took a breath. I sat there in that stand of pines as quiet as a mouse. I watched her for what seemed like an hour, but was more along the lines of 5 to 10 minutes. Suddenly, she stood up, turned to her left, and stared directly at me. She had eyes as black as coal, and a long, thin face with sunken-in cheeks. Her face gave no expression. After she stared at me for about 2 minutes, she turned and walked away from me down the stream until she turned to the right, and went behind a ridgeline out of sight. I sat still, afraid to move for another hour. I eventually worked up the courage to stand up and go investigate. It was more than likely a woman that has been camping in the area, I told myself. And I have nothing to be scared of? I slowly made my way down to the stream where she had been, while being quiet so that I wouldn't alert her if she was still in the area. I made it to the spot at which she had been and began to search the bank of the stream for footprints, as it was a soft, muddy slope where she had been standing. To my surprise, there wasn't a trace. Not a single track or fingerprint in the mud. I followed the path she had taken when she had left, and once again found no evidence of her existence. I decided that it was in my best interest to make the trip back to the truck, for I hadn't the slightest idea of what I had just seen. On the way back, I would tell myself that it was a trick of the mind, and that supernatural beings do not exist, but I just could not for the life of me shake the feeling of dread. I made it back to the truck and sat for a while, waiting on my brother to make it back out. As he loaded his rifle into the truck, I didn't say much of anything. I didn't know how, or if I even should say anything. We had a short conversation about the day's hunt, and when he asked me, "Did you see anything?" I replied, "Nope, not a thing." That was the majority of the conversation on the way to our friend's house. I didn't say a word about that day for a few years, but I eventually told the story to a few family members, including my brother. It has now become a tradition to tell this story around the campfire at the annual family camping trip. I still to this day am uncertain as to what exactly I saw, but one thing is for sure, it wasn't natural. I have accepted the fact that the world isn't black and white, and there are things that we just cannot explain. I believe some things are just better left alone, because honestly, I don't want to know the truth. Next story, lifeguard creep. I'm a 15-year-old male. I was on a swim team, and some of the guys there said I should get a job as a lifeguard. One interview later, and week of training later, and I got a job at my local YMCA. The first couple of days were fun. Everybody was so nice, the job was easy enough, and you always got to meet new people. That fun ended when I had my first shift with this one guy. He was short, lanky, blonde, and was the biggest nerd I've ever seen. For the sake of his privacy, we'll call him Jack. Now, Jack was openly bisexual. Being the dude I am, I didn't really care. As long as he knew I was straight, I was fine. I even introduced myself as the gayest straight man you'll ever see. However, he didn't laugh like us all. Every time he and I shared a shift, I would catch him staring at me. When I was trying to catch a break, he would always walk up to me and talk about anime. He knew I liked it because of his spying on me while I watched it on my breaks. He clearly was into me despite my constant ignoring of him. One day I was waiting for my bus. It was a bit dark out and I was calling my girlfriend, who we'll call M. "Hey babe, just checking in on you. How was work?" She asked me. Work was work, I guess. Just a hot, humid room while telling kids not to run. You? "Oh, nothing much, just fries and fate asses." We both laughed. I was about to reply back when Jack walked out behind me. He was trying to talk to me, but I wasn't listening. I was just smiling and nodding while listening to M talk. My bus pulled up, and before I could get on, he managed to grab my phone, pushed me back, and immediately ran on the bus, talking to him. Now, being the sporty kid inheriting my father's height and mother's intimidation, I immediately ran after him, screaming for my phone back. I ran after him, demanding for my phone back. This little creep, after stealing my phone, had told my girlfriend we were done and that he was my new boyfriend. I was pissed, and after managing to wrestle back my phone, I clocked this guy in the face. His ass was shaking after that. "What the hell, dude?" "You will be sorry for this. I have a knife at home and I'll cut you up right here tomorrow." I froze at those words. This kid had just threatened me my life because he stole my phone. In my frozen state, he decided he wanted to fight me. My girlfriend was still on call. He lunged, trying to steal it from me. This went for about 10 minutes. During that time, I decided to record the entire thing. He kept screaming how he was going to kill me and my slutty girlfriend. Then, he stood up and ran out the door to his stop. That was it. The next day, I got called down to the principal's office. There sat this little hit and his angry mum. "Please sit, Mr. W," the principal said, clearly tired of this. He then went on to state that it's wrong to abuse a significant other like that. What? "You think me and him are... Don't you play dumb? We were dating and you know it. You tried to get with me last night," Jack said. I was in disbelief. This dude had stolen my phone, tried to make me break up with my girlfriend, and decided to say we were dating? This kid was completely insane. Thankfully, through some proofreading, the recording I took, and M being called down to the office, Jack was suspended and fired from lifeguarding. I still work there, and it's mostly a joke I play out in my head. But I still wonder, what if he followed through? Next story, father and son, lake, UFO. A quick side note before I begin. This is, as much as I wish it wasn't, not the only, the worst, or the most chilling experience, more specifically, sighting that I have gone through. This is instead the first, as it is the first that I will be sharing with you. Throughout my life, there has always been something off surrounding me, and I love to tell people these events. I look forward to the future stories I may share. Now let's begin with the story. For some backstory, I live on the east coast of Massachusetts. My house and a lake next to us is separated by a hill and a road, not much. The lake is big, starting with a cove around 300 yards from the hill's end, which is backed up by the rest of the lake behind and to the left of it. Now I have a small family. My parents don't play huge roles in this, nor does my younger brother, who I'll refer to as H for the sake of privacy. At the time, I was 12. You can know me as F now. It was my brother's birthday. And as we did when we were younger, we chose to spend those days away from each other's presences. So, I was away at my father's house while he was having a sleepover with two of his friends. The day went fine, but around 6 p.m. he called us, asking for the Nintendo Switch. So we grabbed it for him and we drove all the way over to my mom's house. We dropped it off, and my dad was only a little annoyed by this. We drove back and commenced where we left off. It was around 6:45 when we got another phone call. Apparently, we had forgotten to drop off all the controllers for them. So I grabbed them and we drove all the way back down to our mum's house. My dad was mumbling something under his breath on the way over, nothing I could understand or hear. We dropped them off, but when I went inside I saw his cake. Now every year since I was 1 year old, my father had made his famous chocolate cake, raspberries or strawberries in the middle, chocolate drizzle everywhere, double layer. I saw a loose piece and I remember thinking clearly, I just spent an hour of my life driving around so my brother can play video games. I'm taking this as sales tax. So I grabbed the piece of cake, wrapped it in saran wrap, and left after dropping off my brother's stuff. I hopped in the car and we were halfway back to my dad's house when guess what? The phone rang. Again, my dad grumbled and told me to look at it. I grabbed the phone, opened it, and the piece of cake I took was one of G's friends. I awkwardly sat there thinking how my dad would react, and I was too lazy to make it sound nicer. I said something along the lines of, guess what? The piece of cake I took was G's friend is. So now he was just fuming. We turned back, and it must have been at least 8 was at the time. It was getting really dark, so by the time I had returned the parcel of cake, it was pitch black. I could make out a telephone pole about 50 yards away, but I couldn't see any details, for instance. I went back outside and into the car. I was exhausted, and my dad probably was too, I remembered thinking. We should just go back and sleep. So I jumped into the back seat and nothing. Normally my dad would keep the car running just so we could go a bit faster, but the car was off, and he was sitting in the driver's seat looking at something in the distance. Dad? I remember calling to him, and he hesitated for a second before giving me a look I now recognize as, "If I show you this, it will help me, but it will hurt you," and then whispered, "Quick, come up here," and had me position myself in the passenger seat, leaning forward from the back seat. His expression was a mixture of awe and confusion. He pointed to the night sky. "Do you see it?" and presumed his staring contest with the night sky. That's when I saw it. Lights, around 7 to 10 of them in a perfectly straight line, making no sound, heading out towards the night sky over our lake. They moved as one, coming from what was most likely a horizontal line. They were curving straight up, and the lights were off too. They cast nothing off of them, no glare or anything. "Just these balls of light heading into the clouds. Do you see it?" he asked. I nodded my head, not wanting to take my eyes off of them. They moved fast, not like a jet, but like they had time to spare. When the last orb disappeared, we drove back without saying a word. I assure you I was exhausted, but I didn't sleep. Instead, thinking of people's UFO stories in a new light, the strings light. That morning, my dad woke me up and said he had found out what had happened. We had just seen SpaceX's satellite launching. That sat well with me until I figured out that SpaceX satellites have a minimum of 40 probes, don't start off horizontally, have a glare because of sun reflection or moon reflection. And to seal the deal, they didn't do any launches at the time in my area. What we saw, I don't know. And I'm not sure I want to. Next story, I witnessed a skinwalker on psilocybin. We drove in late, headlights cutting across brush and stone, the desert pressing in with silence that felt heavier than air. No houses, no fences, just sand, scrub, and the smell of dust when we set up camp. There were 4 of us, R, M, L, and myself, C. L and M brought whiskey and beer. R and I brought mushrooms. Golden teachers, dry and brittle, not measured with care. We split a bag and chewed. They drank. We waited. By the fire, time came loose. R's face blurred a little at the edges, his grin rising and falling like his skin didn't quite fit. Above us, the stars slipped free from their constellations and drifted slowly across the sky. The desert no longer felt empty. It felt alive, listening. When I stood to piss, the shift came. Something stood out there, maybe 20 feet from the fire. At first I thought it was a coyote. Its outline fit, but it was too tall. Its stance stretched in a way that didn't sit right. Its head tilted toward me, ears upright, but the motion was careful, almost human. The wind touched everything around it, my clothes, the mesquite brush, but its fur stayed still. I looked away, then back. Still there, waiting. Back at the fire, I asked, "Did you see that?" M frowned into his beer. "See what?" Before I could answer, R said, "It's here." His voice was flat. "Too sober?" L tried to laugh, saying something about us being shroomed out, but the laugh came too hard, too quick, like he was forcing it. His eyes flicked toward the dark when he thought we weren't looking. Coyotes called then. At first it sounded normal. Then the sound bent. It carried long and strange, a high note breaking into something that sounded like words, almost a woman's voice. Not language I knew, but shaped like speech. The kind of sound that pulls the hair up on the back of your neck because your brain wants to recognize it. The fire guttered, shadows rising tall against the rocks. R sat rigid, not moving. "It's closer," he said. And it was. Just at the edge of the firelight, the same coyote shape. But now it shifted in small ways. The body seemed too long, shoulders wrong,
head cocked too far. The longer I looked, the less it seemed like an animal.
And then it spoke.
Not loud, just a whisper.
My name broken into pieces carried on the wind. I froze. None of us moved.
Then the fire cracked loud enough to make Em jump, and when I looked back, the shape was gone. I woke at dawn with sand in my mouth and a body sore as if I had been crawling in my sleep. My sleeping bag was half unzipped, dirt caked under my fingernails. M and L were groggy, hollow-eyed. R was gone, I asked. Where did R go?
L shrugged too fast.
He left before sunrise. His voice cracked on the word left. Past the rocks, I found tracks in the sand.
Not boot prints, not coyote prints. Long, narrow impressions pressed too deep, some sharp like hooves, others wide like bare feet.
They led away in a straight line until they just stopped, the last print sinking into the sand with nothing beyond it. I told myself it was the mushrooms.
A trick of the desert.
My mind folding in on itself, but sometimes, in the stillness, when the air holds its breath, I hear my name carried wrong through the dark. Not in an animal's call.
Not in a person's voice.
Just something in between, trying it on for size. Next story. Dark horror school. Me and my friends decided to go to a school at night. We decided we were going to play hide and seek. There were 3 of us. As soon as it started, me and my friend went running as fast as we could. We had decided to split up. She went the opposite way of me. I decided to go over to the park area of the school. I kept running till I got to the park area. I started walking, and I walked over to the fence to watch the seeker. I heard a swing moving and immediately turned around, but the swings weren't moving and the sound was gone. I thought I was hearing things till I looked back over the fence. There was a faint grey figure floating just above the football field.
I stared at it for a bit, then I started running.
I immediately called my friends. My voice shaking and scared, I told her I saw something floating above the football field. She could tell I was scared, and my voice was raspy from non-stop running.
I ran till I found my friend.
We immediately went home after we found our other friend. We started walking back, then looked at the fence where I was. It was floating right where I was standing moments ago. We all started running for our lives till we got to our friend's house. I explained what I saw, then we went to bed. The next day, we decided to go back with a few more friends. The school was dark and creepy. We decided to look into the school. Big mistake. There was a tall, black figure. It had moved. We all screamed and ran away. Though everything told us to get away, we decided to go look again, to see if we were hallucinating or seeing it wrong. It was gone. We decided to go over to the other side of the school where everything was dark. We peered into the windows. When we peered into the third window, we saw something dark move under the desk. We decided to leave after that. The next day we went during the daytime. There was nothing.
Every time we go back to that school, though, it never feels right.
1 year later, we decided to go back to the school at night. We started walking, and one of the upstairs lights were on, but as we got closer, they shut off. We decided to go to the front of the school.
Nothing felt right, and when we looked inside, it looked something straight out of a horror movie.
There was a random chair in the middle of the hall. We decided to go back to the window where we saw something move under the desk. This time, the handle starting moving, we ran away, scared again. We went over to the park area and peered at the field next to it. We peered off in the distance and saw a black figure again. We stared at it for a while before heading to our friend's house across the street. We explained what happened, and she decided to join us. We went over to one of the other doors and peered in. Something slid down the hall. We started questioning what it was before we saw something peek around the corner, the same dark figure we saw. Our friend we brought wasn't scared because she didn't see it, but me and 3 others did and ran. We all decided we were going to go home because we had enough of the horror tonight. We all went back to the houses we were staying at. I arrived at my friend's house and heard tapping on the window. We looked out, but nothing. We both could barely sleep that night, but after a while we did. I'm thinking about going to that school with my friends again to play hide and seek and see if it's still there. Next story. Holy Horror Aka Holy Hell by Gary D. up in Ontario, Canada. My hellish childhood trauma revealed,
Not sure if this is really such a good idea,
to crack open the lid of this long-buried casket again. Just the mere thought of reopening this mental cage with its many massive psychological coping mechanism padlocks that firmly secure it makes my skin crawl. This is one of those very painful suppressed memories that your brain does everything it possibly can to protect you from by providing a kind of mental insulation or throwing up a smokescreen to help you to not have to deal with it and thereby preserve your sanity. That being said,
I really wish that this was just some whimsical,
BS made-up story from my imagination, but sadly, it's not. The bizarre shit that happened to me back then has probably twisted my mind and soul into whatever crazy, contorted balloon animal psychosis that I'm suffering from today. What I do know is that what I'm about to tell you
has not been uttered nor discussed with anyone since the time it all happened.
none of those around me today, whether it be close family or friends, are even remotely aware of this part of my nightmarish childhood. And hopefully, by me recounting it now, it doesn't somehow send out some sort of signal or prime the pump to suddenly release a flood of disturbing memories, and even more importantly, that it doesn't bring back the demonic spirit of her again, so that she can continue on with her torment and vicious psychological torturing of me. Yes, I have a creepy childhood memory that still haunts me to this day. And even though it happened to me many decades ago, the associated lingering sharp psychological sting and residual damage to my mind, unless we forget, the bone-chilling mental imagery flashbacks still remain. Just like recognizing even the slightest hint of a familiar smell in the air, which then immediately reminds you of something from your childhood.
She always manages to find me, and usually in my dreams, or should I say, nightmares. Let's rewind this traumatic, life-altering shit show back to the beginning, shall we?
Back when I was just a young lad of about 14 or 15, I was involved in the typical stupid, risky behavior that many young males of our species are known for, throwing caution to the wind and ignoring all and any warnings regarding what is deemed to be safe or sensible. Me and my two best friends at the time fearlessly took on all and any dares or challenges. We were, we thought, invincible, let's set the stage. At that time and at that early age, none of the three of us had gone down the alcohol nor mind-altering drug road yet. Bored as we often were, we actively searched out new challenges and ridiculous things to do. Living in the Great Lakes region in a city located right on the shore of Lake Ontario, we often walked the shoreline, hoping to stumble across something unique or interesting, like maybe the washed-up body of some googly-eyed alien or possibly even a human. But alas, the odds were not stacked in our favor. Very close to where we all lived stood a stretch of very steep sand cliffs. Towering roughly 200 feet high, the cliff face dropped off rather abruptly straight into the lake, with there being just enough of a sandy slope to allow three rambunctious young boys to carefully shimmy down. Being composed of dense, compressed sand, having the consistency much like that of winter-packing snow, hundreds, if not thousands of swallows called this area home, having carefully pecked and clawed out nesting holes along the sides of these cliffs. Naturally, being boys, we lowered ourselves down the side of the sandy cliff face in order to get a closer look. And on one of these occasions, we discovered a very large hole, which appeared to be the opening to a fairly sizable tunnel. What pterodactyl type? Giant monstrosity of a bird made this big hole. Our immature little minds must have thought. We quickly realized that the gaping sandy orifice was indeed plenty big enough to allow any one of us to crawl inside.
Ah, a new adventure awaits.
I can't remember who had the balls to go in first, but whoever it was stuck their body halfway in before quickly pulling it back out again. Way too dark in there, and who knows what the hell is lying in wait. excitedly licking its jagged fangs, anxious and eager to rip off a pubescent boy's head or two. We decided to return the next day so we could bring along a candle, a small plastic plate to stand it on, and a trusty BIC lighter. Without telling our parents, of course, we went back there early that next morning. I remember our giddy excitement as we pondered what horrible beast or freak of nature may be laying inside. Dave volunteered to go in first, and we remaining two didn't fight him for the bragging rights of this endeavor. Dave's upper body slid into the earthy womb whilst sliding a short, stubby lit candle in front of him on the small plastic plate. Then we saw just the soles of his ratty old sneakers twitching before he finally disappeared altogether. We called into him a couple of times and all we heard back was, "So cool." He told us that just inside the main entrance he'd crawled through a short, tight tunnel, which then led to an opening, with there being a small, crudely carved out cave on either side, right and left. Each was like a very small room, roughly 4 feet high and about 5 feet in diameter. He yelled to us that his candle had blown out a couple of times, and that he had to fumble around to relight it. After not hearing anything from him for another couple of minutes, we called into the hole. "What do you see?"
And are you okay?
His muffled reply sounded distant, as it echoed and bounced along the earthen walls and through the curving tunnels. I just crawled through another longer tunnel, and it ended up in a lower ceilinged but much deeper cave. Even at that young age, I already hated the nauseating feeling associated with claustrophobia. To be suffocatingly squeezed into a very confined spot, like a piece of human meat, tightly wrapped up in a giant burrito, minus the refried beans and rice, of course. There was a brief silence, and then we suddenly heard Dave yell out, "What the fuck?"
There's something in here with me.
"What is it?" we responded. "Something pretty small."
I'm not sure, maybe a skunk or a raccoon?
I can see its yellow glowing eyes staring back at me.
And there's an awful stink, like something died in here.
Rob and I looked at each other, crinkling up our noses.
As if we could actually smell whatever the hell it was that was decomposing in there. Suddenly,
Dave popped back out from the hole like a rabid gopher that had just been chased out of hell, having wild eyes and with his mouth hanging wide open. He looked white as a ghost and seemed to stutter a bit, before finally squeaking out in a half-whisper and half-shrieky voice and sounding kinda strained, like he was constipated and struggling with a stubborn bowel movement. "It's not an animal!"
I don't know what the fuck it is. It almost looks human. One of you go in there and take a look.
Rob and I laughed, saying that it was probably just a scared squirrel. Rob grabbed the candle out of Dave's hand, relit it, and then headed right in. Dave just sat there quietly in the sand, which was not normal for him, with eyes bulging wide open, and his mouth positioned in a permanent O. After about 5 minutes, Rob crawled back out, handed me the candle,
and barked out, "You gotta take a look at this thing."
"What did you see in there?" I replied.
I have no fucking idea. It's some freaky looking thing. It almost looks like one of those vintage dolls, like a tattered doll of a creepy old witch maybe. But what the fuck? I could hear it moving and its yellow eyes kept blinking.
And it's making some fucked up, wheezy breathing sound.
It's your turn to go in, and then you can tell us what the fuck it is.
And even though the very furthest point within the whole tunnel system was maybe only about 10 feet in from the main entrance, in the mind of a terrified 15-year-old boy who's slowly crawling along in the pitch darkness on all fours and nervously pushing a dimly lit candle in front of him, it felt a hell of a lot more like it was 100 feet. Unfortunately, at that time, mobile phones didn't exist yet, as the brightness of the screen, or even better yet, the flashlight feature, surely would have made handling this situation a whole lot easier. My heart started racing and my mouth went dry. Like suddenly being struck by a lightning bolt, I had this overwhelming feeling of pending doom, and it had absolutely nothing to do with being scared of whatever bloody rodent was hiding in that cave. It was the thought of utter dread, the chest-tightening fear of getting wedged tightly in one of those tunnels, constricted, feeling like some giant anaconda had wrapped itself around me, crushing my ribs, slowly squeezing the life out of me and methodically suffocating me one breath at a time. My head started spinning and I felt like I was going to pass out. Then my next thought was, what if the sand roof suddenly just gives way and everything caves in? Would I immediately be crushed to death, or would I just lay there suffering for a while, unable to take a breath, just waiting in agony for my heart to stop beating and for the last of my brain cells to die? Would it feel like my body was being stabbed by a million pins before slowly growing cold? After the initial barrage of excruciating pain, signals to the brain had eventually subsided, or would I be lucky enough to die instantly? The guys taunted me, calling me pussy, and tried to persuade me to go in by saying, grow a pair and man up. Not wanting to have this hanging over my head for years to come, and from then on be labelled as a wimp or coward, I sucked it up and grabbed the candle. Breathe, I thought to myself, just breathe. My brain felt like it was on fire, and my entire body suddenly seemed to be made of lead. I took another deep breath and made my way into the tunnel entrance. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my throat as I slowly inched my way forward through the first little tunnel. I was marginally relieved once I reached the opening, revealing the two small caves to the left and right. I held the candle up and surveyed the bowels of this sandy labyrinth. Saw nothing exciting, just the scrape marks on the walls, made by whatever tool was used to create this passageway in the caves. What's happening?
I heard someone yell from outside. Do you see her?
Do you see her yet? No, I responded. I haven't gotten that far yet. The flame on the wick of my candle started flickering like crazy, and then seemed to grow taller and shine brighter.
I'm going in now, I screamed. That second tunnel was much tighter and considerably longer than the first.
I stopped a few times, allowing my mind to torture me by replaying the sardine trapped in a tin can scenario over and over again in my head. I tried to think happy thoughts, but it didn't work, so I kept pushing forward. Finally, after what seemed like a half hour, but which in reality was probably more like 5 minutes, I reached the opening that led into the furthest cave enclosure. I was breathing heavily.
So just sat there for a minute or so to get it together.
Once I was a bit calmer, I lifted the plate holding the shrinking candle up, out in front of me. Like the guys had said, this last room had a much lower ceiling, but stretched deeper into the cliffside. I remember crawling further forward and moving the candle from side to side.
Suddenly there it was.
At first, at the very far corner, I saw the bright canary yellow eyes staring right at me and occasionally blinking. Then there was some movement. What really disturbed me was the cracking sound it made, like tiny tree branches or twigs snapping. And then there was that putrid smell of death. For whatever stupid reason, I decided to nudge forward so I could get a better look.
I guess somehow, in some magical way, I must have grown a large pair while I was in there.
Moving up a few more feet made all the difference. By candlelight, I could now clearly see the mystery critter. My eyes must have grown 3 sizes that day. There, cowering in the far corner, was a living, breathing, human-like creature. I'm guessing it was only about 2 feet tall or so, and it resembled a withered-up witch. A leathery skinned hag with the already mentioned yellow eyes, but also having long, frizzled hair, a wrinkled-up, apple doll face, an elongated nose, and a partially open mouth, showing an assortment of fang-like, crooked yellow teeth. As mentioned earlier, no alcohol, hallucinogenic drugs, nor psychosis was involved here. I just sat there, hunched over, in a kind of catatonic state, afraid to move and provoke her. To be honest, I was shitting my pants thinking, there's no fucking way that this can be real.
There's just no fucking way.
It must be some sort of battery-operated witch doll with glowing yellow eyes that blinked.
Limbs that moved and that came with an optional smells like death scent feature. I heard the guys yell again, asking, "Do you see her? What the fuck is it?"
I was afraid to answer, not knowing what she or it would do. Finally, After it dawned on me again as to exactly where I was, being tightly crammed inside the unsafe sand infrastructure of a towering cliff, I just wanted to get the hell out. I backed away slowly, panting, keeping a close eye on the freaky-looking witch thing, hoping that it wouldn't move. And as I backed up, heading towards the tunnel to make my escape, the creepiest shit that I've probably ever experienced happened. The demon witch devil doll, or whatever the hell you want to call it, suddenly perked up and came to life by sitting up straight and then, with its body turned completely sideways, quickly scuttled towards me by running up the side of the cave wall, and then upside down along the ceiling, all the while accompanied by a nauseating sound, which I would best describe as resembling that of a giant.
Enraged Dungeness crab running across a cobblestone road towards me.
That creepy as hell hollow shell, crustacean castanets-like sound still haunts me to this day. As it ran towards me, I screamed like I'd just realized that I was spontaneously combusting. My heart was beating out of my chest, and I made it out of the entire tunnel system much faster than I would have expected. Once I managed to crawl out of the main entrance exit hole, I just kept on running. I didn't speak with my friends until later that day, when they came by my house to find out what happened. I told them the story, and we were all scared shitless. What we didn't know at the time was that one of our parents had overheard one of us talking about it. They were concerned about how unsafe these sandcliff tunnels and caves were, and ended up calling the police about it. Maybe a week later, the three of us worked up enough courage to go back and just stand near the tunnel entrance. To our surprise, the whole cliffside was now gone, as we found out later that the city had arranged to have this dangerous and potentially unsafe tunnel system demolished with the use of dynamite. The three of us only spoke about it a few times shortly afterwards, and then unanimously decided to bury this horrifying incident in our memories forever, as fate would have it. Rob suddenly and quite unexpectedly passed away in his 30s, and Dave, by way of a massive heart attack, died in his early 40s. Like I said, she revisits me from time to time in my dreams, and unfortunately, I've woken up many times with my heart racing and drenched in a cold sweat due to the relentless sound of castanets echoing in my head. Next story, we saw something in the Victorian High Country. Just to set the stage, I live in rural Victoria, Australia. I won't say the name of the town for privacy, but it's about a 3.5-hour drive from where I live to the Victorian High Country, which is a 1.6 million hectare range of forests and mountains which is often explored for camping or four-wheel driving. I took 2 weeks off of work for a camping trip with me and my two buddies and their partners. We did this quite often and never saw anything too out of the ordinary,
as Australia doesn't really have any large predators.
Apart from feral cats, anyhow. The trip was a huge success for the first couple days. We moved around a couple of campsites and were having a great time. Until that night, it will never leave my mind. We decided that we wanted to change campsite once more to a place with a prettier view. Took us about 2.5 hours to find it, but it was so worth it. Gorgeous big gum trees all around and a river that flowed through that gave the whole site a really calm feeling. We parked our rigs and started setting up camp. I was the only one with a rooftop tent, so I spent about an hour helping my idiot friends set up their tents, which always had missing parts. After about 2 hours, we were completely set up, awnings down, tents and camp chairs set up. I bought some solar panels and figured out how to hook it up to a TV. I know, it's not really in the camping vibe, but who doesn't love Mario Kart while listening to birds and the crackle of a fire? We were at that site for a couple days without trouble. Heard a couple of strange noises, but just chalked it up to the usual outback wildlife until the sun set on one of the nights. We spent that whole day pretty much doing nothing except sharing stories and relaxing. By the time the sun was coming down, I decided I would cook dinner.
I got out all of my equipment, but I couldn't for the life of me find my cooking utensils. So I thought they might have fallen to the back of my truck while coming down the trail.
I took my headlamp as it was getting dark and went searching, but the whole time I couldn't shake this feeling that I was being watched.
I eventually found the box and struggled my way back down the muddy trail to camp.
When I heard what I thought was footsteps, heavy footsteps, I dropped the box and stopped in my tracks. Hello?
"Oh, come on, boys, this isn't funny," I said, as I thought it was just one of those a-holes trying to scare me.
But I got no response and couldn't see anything. So I picked up the box and continued back down to camp. Then, like a flash out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow dart through the trees. I dropped the box and came to a stop again. The utensils and pans went tumbling down the slope, but I was more focused on what I just saw. "Mate, I'm really not in the mood for this right now," I said sternly.
Once again, no answer. I realized in that moment that it was completely silent. I couldn't even hear the river anymore.
So in a hurry, I packed everything back into the box and hustled down the trail. I got back to camp, and my buddies instantly were giving me grief. "Come on, you took your bloody time. We're hungry. Get to cooking, Ramsay." I didn't say a word. Just got my cooking utensils out and went to the river to clean them off. My mate Jonesy must have realised something had happened and came down after me and asked, "You right, mate? And not often you don't make a snarky comeback." I told him what I saw and heard while looking for my stuff. He starked it up to just an animal. "Probably just a kangaroo, champ, don't fret, all right?" I took his word for it. After about 15 minutes of cleaning, we went back to camp and I started cooking. Everything was normal again. We were laughing and sharing stories over a hot meal and were having a great time. It was about 11 p.m. and we started hearing koalas.
I don't know if anyone would know what they sound like.
It's like if a pig was getting strangled and squealing at the same time, but then out of nowhere they all stopped. And we heard something that wasn't quite right. It sounded like a koala, but wrong. Like something was trying to imitate the noise it was making. We laughed about it at first, but when it wouldn't stop, we became worried. "Should we go see if it's okay?" said Jonesy. My other friend Ash replied, "Nah, screw that. It's like a maze up that way, you get lost." So instead, we just tried to ignore it. Eventually, I had enough of overthinking and got on the tray of my truck to use the spotlights I had set up for hunting foxes back home, worried that whatever was making that noise was the same thing I saw earlier. My buddies thought I was an idiot. "Mate, come on, it's just a koala, nothing to be worried about." But as I was scanning the trees, I caught something. It was big, unlike anything I had seen before, and fast. Too fast, my face went pale white. Jonesy's wife, Evelyn, immediately noticed my expression. "Oi, guys, look at he!" They all looked over at me and were shocked. "Guys,
What in the fant is that?" As they looked where my spotlight was pointing, they saw it too.
it was huge and maybe standing just over 8 foot tall. It had this massive yellow eyes, similar to a cougar's, but it looked almost humanoid. It was peering from around one of the big gum trees, staring right at my light. In an instant, it climbed up the tree that it was standing behind. Now mind you, widowmaker gum trees are huge, sometimes growing up to 60, maybe 70 feet, and it scaled up halfway in an instant. It peered around again and I could see one of its hands clinging to the wood. It was pale and muscular, and hid big veins sticking out of the skin. I was terrified.
I jumped down from my truck and started to pack up my stuff. "Nope, I'm done. I'm not sticking around with that," my friends agreed.
Just as we started packing up, we heard it start scratching the tree.
Almost like it was sliding down it, then we heard the footsteps.
They started slow, then got faster and faster. We instantly jumped in our trucks and sped back up the trail in terror. It followed us for about 20 minutes, keeping its distance but maintaining speed. We eventually got back to one of the main trails and radioed in over the Clebe, but we didn't get a response. My mate Ash came in over the radio. "There's no use trying to leave all our stuff down there. Let's just hunker down here all together and wait till sunrise." He had a point.
I work a minimum wage job and had too much expensive equipment down there to just leave.
So we parked on the trail and waited. The whole night we were silent, waiting for whatever that thing was to spring out and attack, but nothing. We didn't see it again. By the time the sun was up, we had found the bravery to go get out stuff and left. We cut our holiday short by 5 days, and we didn't speak about what we saw the whole drive back. About after we got home, Jonesy came over to my house. After about an hour of just talking trash, he asked, "What do you reckon that thing was? Some bloke on drugs or what?" I didn't respond. Its eyes were enough to give me nightmares for months. "Just leave it," my partner responded, so he did. We still haven't talked about what it was and have avoided that side of the VHC anytime we go back. But sometimes I feel like I'm being watched when we go camping and worry that it could be that thing again, slowly stalking from a distance.
Next story, did something follow me back to my dorm?
I'm from a small state in the northeastern part of India called Nagaland. We are a tribal community with a primarily Christian population. This happened to me back in 2011 when I was a 17-year-old boy. Although I am a Christian, at this point in time in the story, I was not that religious, and I also didn't believe in paranormal stuff, but I did love a good horror flick. I'm not a good writer, but here we go. I was in 12th grade, studying science at a government-funded college that also had 11th and 12th grade classes. Since the college was in a different district 80 kilometers away from my home district, I stayed in one of the college's main dorms. The college was located in a village at the outskirts of town, and my dorm was 6 to 7 minutes walk away. I used to go home only during the holidays. One morning, I woke up a bit late for class, again. I hurriedly put on my uniform and rushed off to class without breakfast. As the day went on, I kept feeling some kind of burning and itching sensation on my back. It was really uncomfortable, but I couldn't check it until 2:30 p.m. after all my classes were done. I returned to my dorm, called some of my dorm mates in the same year, and asked them to take a picture of my back with my phone so that I could see. Imagine my surprise when I saw 10 perfectly straight, thin scratch marks starting from right below my shoulders all the way down to the small of my back. While it wasn't deep or anything serious, it did break my skin, and there was a tiny bit of blood and some clear exudate already clotting over the scratches. That night, after dinner, all 11 of us dorm mates from the same year stuffed ourselves into one of our tiny dorm rooms to discuss my situation. One of them suggested it could be a demon cat spirit that scratched me in my sleep. Apparently, it had marked me and it would come for me again. I guess it's one of the folklores from his tribe. Others suggested that a spirit, ghost, or demon could have attached itself to me on my walks back to my dorm after my late-night outings. After classes, I used to go out a lot to meet up with my friends from the neighboring dorms. We'd either hang out at their dorms or get a taxi to the town. Either way, at the end it's always near or past midnight when I'd always have to do my 6-7 minutes walk back to my dorm alone through one of two paths, both of which get very dark and creepy at night. Some people here believe that if you return home very late at night, you are supposed to spit outside the doorway before you close the door and enter your home. Apparently that keeps anything following you from entering. In the end, after all that discussion, we just laughed it off, saying that I probably did that to myself while scratching my back in my sleep or something. I went to my room at around 11-12 p.m. to turn in for the night, not bothered at all about spirits or ghosts. My roommate, who was a year below me, was already asleep, and so I turned off the lights and went to sleep.
After around 2 hours maybe, I suddenly woke up.
I was sleeping on my back, and when I woke up, my right hand was raised up straight. I could feel some kind of pressure on my wrist, like something was grabbing it firmly and pulling me towards it. The room was too dark to see anything clearly, being illuminated only by the moonlight barely coming in through the curtains. However, I could barely see a tall, dark figure standing by the bottom right side of my bed, holding and pulling my wrist. It was just black, fuzzy, shadow-like.
I couldn't make out any features.
It took like 5 seconds for my groggy mind to process all of this. The instant I realized what was going on, I got up screaming, and in one leap, I jumped onto my roommate's bed across the room, startling him awake. I turned and looked over at my bed, but the figure had already disappeared. Considering how unathletic I am, I was surprised I was able to make that jump. I laid next to him under his sheets, shaking like a leaf. I quietly whispered to him what had happened, and he too got tense and scared. We were so scared that neither of us were willing to go over to the switch to turn on the lights. We laid like that in the dark under his sheets for what seemed like eternity. all the while reciting the Lord's Prayer, even though I wasn't very religious. When we finally started calming down a bit, my phone that I had left beside my pillow started getting multiple text messages back to back, which made my heart jump. It wouldn't have mattered, but the edgy me at that time had set the message notification to something dark. The notification sound was a high-pitched, evil-sounding voice screaming, "Sorry I have to yell, but you have a message from hell." Sure, the timing of the messages could have been a coincidence, but at that time, the already on-edge me and roommate couldn't take it. We both tensed up and fear shrouded us again.
I was desperately wishing, please let this be the last message.
After one message, there would be a half to a second break. I'd open my eyes hoping, and suddenly the next notification would start playing again, making me jolt. This went on for around 10 times.
After some time it stopped, but now I couldn't let my guard down. Neither I nor my roommate could sleep, and we stayed like that on his bed till the morning light started trickling in through the curtains.
It was round 5:36 or BCM. Finally, I could hear some of the other students had started waking up and going about their business in the corridor outside. I got out of my roommate's bed, went over to my phone and checked the messages. They were promotional ad messages from my phone carrier. I checked the time and the message had started coming in a little past. I got out of my room to wash up and get some breakfast. Although I had no intentions of letting the senior dorm mates, who were bachelor's degree students, to know about my haunting, they somehow found out. Right after breakfast, some of the dorm officials among the seniors came to my room and asked me to describe to them what had happened. They looked around my room and saw the posters of metal bands that I had put up on the walls. I don't remember anymore, but most probably they were posters of Slipknot, Korn, Children of Bodom, Cradle of Filth, etc. Our state being primarily a Christian state and the seniors being a very religious bunch, they took down all the posters and prayed for me. I was still shaken up from the night's incident, and I was feeling very apprehensive about sleeping in my room again. Luckily, my parents were passing through town that day, on their way to the next district for some work. I called them up, had them come pick me up, and I spent a week away to clear my head. After my break, when I returned, nothing ever happened anymore. I completed my 12th grade without any more incidents and left for college elsewhere.